Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm definitely not Max Keiser. Time now to turn to George Galloway, the Respect Party member of Parliament for Bradford West.
Wonderful to see you. Wonderful to appear with the real star of the show.
Well, you are crowdfunding your campaign for the general election 2015, and of course we had to have a feminine touch because I've been watching Emily Maitlis on BBC Newsnight asking these very soft questions of the likes of Ed Balls and the Labour Party representatives and the Tory Party representatives. And one thing that really struck me was that this notion that somehow big business has to support you, otherwise you're not a legitimate candidate.
Yes, once upon a time Labour would have worn it as a badge of honour, but now that it's all balls, the Labour Party, I'm afraid the animal has changed. We don't have any big business backers. We don't even have any trade union backers. If I funded my election campaigns myself, they'd say it was being bought by Moscow Gold as an RT presenter and so on. So we've gone the democratic route. And hundreds of people so far have donated, amounts small, medium, and we've still a bit to go. I think there's about 18 days to go to reach the target of £20,000, and we're confident that we will reach that. We're standing in many other parts of the country, and our candidates don't have the same opportunity to raise money as I do because they don't yet have the profile. So this 20,000, of course, will be used for our election campaign generally, as well as my own re-election.
One of the things that Emily Maitlis was actually forced to ask Ed Balls was like, what's wrong with being on the side of the working class and the workers? Why not do that?
Well, the clue is in the name, Labour, but it definitely doesn't do what it says on the tin. Once upon a time, the Labour Party came into being 110 years ago or so to represent the people who were not the business class. Indeed, they were constituted precisely to counterbalance the overweening power of finance and capital and the employers and so on. But somewhere along the way they have morphed. They have morphed from a butterfly back to a slug.
We've seen that across Europe, of course. It doesn't matter if it's a party of the left or the right. They ended up being neoliberal, which is all the same and about big business and supporting big business and big banks. But we've seen with Syriza and Podemos this rise of this new sort of anti-austerity parties. And of course, in the United Kingdom, you've had a lot of austerity for the very lower class. Do you see any sort of Syriza or Podemos-like parties emerging here?
Well, it's definitely potentially possible. There's us, we're the red part. There's the Greens, they're the green part. And of course, the point you make is the $64,000 one, that every time Ed Miliband criticizes the excesses of the city and the banks and the donor class, the Prime Minister bats it back with, well, this all happened on your watch. HSBC, if there were any crimes involved, they all happened when Gordon Brown was at the Treasury and Tony Blair was at number 10 Downing Street. And this is a fatal flaw in Labour's critique. The reason the bankers were able to take us off the cliff was because of the deregulation, the light touch regulation, the bonanza, which Blair and Brown presided over in unleashing the dogs of naked in tooth and claw free market capitalism.
In the first half of the show, we covered the fact that there was a 12-person riot squad of police that knocked on the door of some possible benefit cheats in Croydon. Yet, with this story about HSBC, you say if a crime was committed, but of course, even if a crime were committed, if the legal and justice system here don't investigate it, did it ever happen at all?
Well, I'm looking across the river here at the City of London where there have been precious few arrests. If you picked somebody's pocket in Liverpool Street Station, you'd be behind bars pretty damn quick. But if you picked 1 million, 100 million, 200 million, 1 billion out of the financial system and thereby brought the country to ruin and years of austerity, which is another word for slump and savage cuts in people's standards of living, well, you'll probably get put in the House of Lords.
Well, We talked about that as a form of benefit cheating. So the top 1%, the elite, the bankers, the sort of corporate class have received the benefits of 0% interest rates, of bank bailouts. But peerages, since Tony Blair, has actually become a form of benefits, that they get handed this benefit of a peerage and they get to lord it over everybody else. Suddenly they're a lord. And the likes of Stephen Green, who is ordinary Stephen Green, and even after David Cameron saw the documentary evidence of what may or may not be a crime, but certainly is pretty dodgy.
Rampant immorality. Yeah. I was in the House of Lords last night for a meeting, and I was astonished at the kind of lounge creepers, brothel creepers we used to call them, that were wafting around. Quite evidently now lords of the realm, and one or two ladies. I didn't recognize any of them. None of them have ever done anything in public life, yet they are sitting in Parliament for the rest of their lives without anyone ever having cast a vote for them. And the reason they're there is almost certainly because they purchased a tennis match with the Prime Minister, or lent their swimming pool to the Leader of the Opposition, or gave very large sums of money to the political process. And the HSBC scandal has turned up lords a-leaping. They're leaping everywhere. People I'd never even heard of, didn't even know were lords. Lord Fink, I mean, can you believe it? There's someone called Lord Fink, and he's in the House of Lords. Why? Well, we can all guess why.
Somebody who's not yet in the House of Lords, but probably one day will be, is Tony Blair. You have the most successful crowdfunding campaign for a film in UK history was your film, The Killings of Tony Blair. How much did you raise? What's going on with that film? And tell us some of the shocking stuff that you've discovered.
Well, first of all, he won't go to the House of Lords, because if he did, he would have to register his earnings. And the one man in Britain who cannot possibly register his earnings is Tony Blair, because as this film will show, he's working for every tyranny, every dictatorship, every military junta, every grubby, dirty, rapacious corporation that you could possibly imagine, and more. The Sunday Times revealed a story we were going to reveal, that the son of the former king of Saudi Arabia was paying him $80,000 a month as a retainer and a 2% cut on any deals that he did. Now, one of the deals done by that oil company was with China, and it was worth $1 billion. 2% of $1 billion is a lot of money. Now, Tony Blair, his name is already mud. Can you imagine if he had to sit there with a pen, a quill, on a piece of House of Lords notepaper and register all of this? We set out dealing with the killings of Tony Blair, the killing of the Labour Party as we knew it and we've just been discussing, the killing of 1 million people in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere by extension. But the really startling and surprising thing is the financial killing that he has been making. And it will make your eyes water. I thought nothing could shock me about Tony Blair, but he's become the male equivalent of a call girl. He sits there waiting for the phone to ring. And the only question that matters is, can you afford me? Not how many people you've killed, how many journalists you've locked up, how many people you're torturing. None of that matters to Tony Blair. He'll put lipstick on any pig as long as the price is right.
Well, speaking of lipsticks on pigs, he also worked for J.P. Morgan.
That was his first.
Immediately after walking out of Downing Street, he is suddenly paid £2.5 million retainer a year.
He became a multi-millionaire within 1 minute of resigning from Parliament. 1 minute. He was hired instantaneously on £2 million. But I've got to tell you, Stacy, that's small, mere loose change for Tony Blair. The highest published estimation of the money he's made in the last 7 years is £100 million. But I'm ready to tell you it's very, very, very much more than that. 7 fat years for the Middle East peace envoy, 7 lean years for the people he's supposed to be serving.
What about the population here? In America, that's not really allowed, only because of the population gets it's very divided, right, left, but you know, whichever side you're on the opposite, they'll be very vocal, expressing disdain for your making so much money. Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton are one. They've made $100 million since he left office. So it's constantly covered in the news there. It's constantly attacked. What is the problem here? Is it the libel? Why won't people discuss this?
No, it's the ironclad consensus on the two front benches that this is the kind of career path they want for themselves. Max himself coined the phrase that being the Prime Minister used to be the acme, the apex of anyone's life, anyone's career. But now, as Max put it, it's just a stop on your resume. And one day, as our prime ministers and leaders get younger and younger, they've got longer and longer to go in their business career. One day, both David Cameron and Ed Miliband hope to be in the same league. That's why fewer of them will ever go to the House of Lords, because of the need to register the interests, the wealth, the earnings that you have. Far from registering his earnings, Tony Blair has surrounded them in the thickest of hedges, most of which he legislated to grow just in time. I mean, you've got to hand it to him. He introduced several reforms which have now grown by the time he needs them to shield him, shade him from the spotlight of public interest. But where there's a will, there's a way. And all kinds of whistleblowers and experts have been coming forward for our film and exposing the avarice, the greed. It's beyond the dreams of avarice. These are two people, Cherie Blair and Tony Blair, who were never rich. And now they must look back on those days and wonder.
Barack Obama was one of the first to crowdfund a campaign, I would say. He raised almost $1 billion from $5, $10. You're only seeking £20,000 on startjoin.com.
Yeah.
Should you become Prime Minister, say that one day you ended up as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, what would you do differently than Tony Blair or David Cameron?
Well, it would be rather emptier over there than it is now, because half of them would be in jail.
You're not talking about the Tower of London.
Well, the Tower of London is an enticing prospect. There is a traitor's gate there where they used to strap people to a pole and wait for the rising tide to drown them. But that's probably cruel and unusual punishment, and I don't approve of capital punishment anyway. But a lot of them, in their betrayal of the country, have gone far further than any KGB spies inside the British establishment ever did. Their betrayal of the interests of our country has been almost total, and our country's in a big mess now. We've been in a mess before. In 1940 and 1941, we were standing alone against Hitler, who was just across the channel there, but at least a leadership emerged that knew what had to be done and was ready to do it, even to the point of, as Mr. Churchill said, if we're left lying here on the cabinet floor choking in our own blood, we will never surrender. We don't have that kind of leadership anymore, and we very, very badly need it.
Well, there you have it. Good luck with your campaign.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And that's it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Stacy Herbert, and that guy, Max Keiser, who's left. I'd like to thank our guest, George Galloway, a member of Parliament for Bradford West. And if you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.